Switch statements. A switch statement is another way to make decisions, especially when you have many specific options to choose from. Example, you create a variable called day of week. You check that variable. If it's Monday, do one thing. If it's Tuesday, do something else, and so on. Why it's useful. Switch statements help you keep your code neat and readable when you're dealing with lots of specific values. To illustrate the use of a switch statement, let's create a simple application. I'll double-click on the Activity Maker template, and let's call this application Traffic Light. In this project, we'll create a manually operated traffic light, and we'll use the switch statement to be able to change the traffic light's colors from green, yellow to red. I'll create the traffic light using SVG graphics, but before I do that, I'll ensure that our page has a page ID. So here we are, page 1 of 1. I'll apply an ID to the page, which is always a good idea. Now let's create, well, before we create our traffic light, let's just add a touch of style. I'll select my design styles, and this time I'll select a design style called Cozy. Once again, I'll go into Tools and Themes, create a background color, select Advance, and hide the header. Now let's go ahead and generate our traffic light using scalable vector graphics. So I have my SVG editor, select my rectangle tool, draw a rectangle, I'm just going to center that, provide it with a fill, maybe increase its stroke, not too much, increase its roundness. Now I'll add 3 lamps for our traffic light. I'm holding down the Shift key to make a perfect circle. I think I'll make that a little larger. Select Edit, Duplicate. Let's get that up here and duplicate again. I'll hold down my Shift key, select all of the circles, ensure that they're aligned in the center, and just adjust them. Now here's a very, very, very important step. We need to be able to provide an ID for each of these because we'll use script to target and change the color of each of these circles. We'll now refer to them as lamps. The first one will be lamp 1. I'll ensure that I hit enter to assign an ID to that element. This will be lamp 2, enter, and finally lamp 3. So to ensure, look, You can just simply click on the element to ensure that each of these has an ID. I think I'll fill the center with gray, and later, of course, programmatically or with script, we'll change the color of these. Now let's add our little button that we'll use. This will be our switch button. Select my pointer tool. I'll label the button. Provide it with a color. I'll then drag my selection tool over both of these objects, and I'll group them. Now this is one unit, and here's where we'll place the code. I'll right click, select branch option, and that'll get us into our branch options. We want to execute command, which gives us our editor. And here's where we begin to add our script. The very first thing we're going to do is retrieve. We're going to create a variable, a local variable called current light, and retrieve its value from global memory. Now, of course, we haven't declared it. It doesn't exist in global memory. And so what we're going to do is a little trick here. I'm going to create an if statement. And this is a little hard to get your head around at first. I'll explain this in detail in just a second. First, I'll type in the code and then explain it. So what we have here is an if statement, and all of this needs to evaluate to true in order for us to initialize this variable to 0. Now let's take this apart, and you start from the innermost function here. So the innermost is number. That's a function. If current light is not yet defined, then isNumber will return false. The exclamation point is a unary operator that switches false to true. So if we've never defined current light, it's going to come back undefined. Is undefined a number? No, it's false. Then the little exclamation point will turn false into true. Therefore, this entire statement evaluates to true. If current light is undefined, we're going to give it an initial value. Then we're going to run another check. Is current light less than 3? Here's our block. If it is less than 3, let's take the old value of current light and then add 1 to it. So as long as it's less than 3, we're going to, each time we click on that button, we're going to add 1 to current light. And you'll see that we'll use current light in our switch statement. But what if it's not less than 3? We need to initialize it to 1. So the very first time we get the value current light, it's undefined. Is undefined a number? No. We then flip no to yes, so we flip false to true. We give it an initial value of 0. Is 0 less than 3? Yes. Therefore, we add 1 to 0. We get 1, and now the new value of current light is 1. We need to remember that. We need to place that in global memory, otherwise we'll keep resetting current light to 1. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to switch between green, yellow, and red, and so we need current light to change. Here's where we place it in global memory. Current light, see these two match, and then we place the value, the current value of current light, which is now 1. We then need to reset all of our lamps to gray. So essentially, before we turn on any one lamp, we just want to have a starting point, and that'll be gray. So this is a hexadecimal value that represents gray. So essentially, this is a hex value, so CCC. This is the first two C's are the red component, the second two are the green component, and then the third two are the blue component, RGB. So this is an RGB color expressed as a hexadecimal value. We're going to set all of our lamps a gray. So this is just so that we have a nice starting point. And then here's where we add our switch statement. So we have a switch statement, the keyword switch, and we're switching on the value of current light. So switch statement has a keyword switch. This is what we're switching on. So current light will be 1, 2, or 3. And then this is the block, our switch block. Now we put in our cases. Case 1, we'll change the color of lamp 1. Now we could simply put in the word green here, but to get you accustomed to RGB colors, I'll use the hexadecimal for green, which will be no red, full green, and no blue. So again, these are RGB components. So 0 value red, the full value for green, and no value for blue. So essentially this is creating the color green. I'll break. And then we could essentially copy and paste. So here's case 2. We're changing the value of lamp 2. And now we'll have full red and full green, which makes a yellow. Case 3, change lamp 3. So we need full red, no green, and no blue. By full, I really mean, so FF, if you actually convert FF into decimal, you get a value of 255, and that's the top value that you can place. So this red component, if it's at 255, that means it's fully red with no green and no blue. So FF is just 255 in decimal. After each of these case statements, after each case, we have a break. And what the break prevents us from doing is having the code jump down into the next case. So essentially, we execute this line, then we break, so we jump out of the switch. If it's case 2, we execute this line and then jump out of the switch. So you can imagine us as if we're going down a railroad track, and here we come up to a switch. Whatever the value of current light is, if it's 1, this gets executed. If it's 2, this gets executed. If it's 3, then this. That's all that's happening here, and it is just a lot cleaner. If you have a lot of cases, it's a lot cleaner to write it this way than an if statement. So essentially, a switch is just a modified if statement. It's a conditional statement. Now let's troubleshoot our work. Let's see if it works. We'll save and close, save. We'll exit, save our work, and then once again we'll click on the traffic light and ensure that it covers 100% of the screen and it's centered. There we go. Let's try it out. We'll preview this in the browser. So again, LodeStar is now serving up this application to the default browser, and we're starting off with our default color. Well, actually here we set our default color, but the cozy design style takes control. It wants to control the color scheme here. It's kind of an assertive design style, so that's why our theme is not showing up here. Okay, so let's switch for the first time. We get our green, then we have our yellow light, and then we have our red light. If we switch again, green, yellow, red. Case 1, case 2, case 3. Current light is now equal to or assigned the value of 1. We add 1 to 1, we get 2. We add 1 to 2 and we get 3. Now because it's not less than 3, we set it back to 1. So I hope that illustrates the use of the switch statement and how it can make your code very readable and very useful. Put it into practice, and until next time.